March 9, 1945. Tokyo, Japan. The night sky glows orange as 325 Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers circle overhead, their bomb bays open. Below, families huddle in wooden homes, clutching photographs and identity papers. Radio broadcasts crackle with evacuation orders, but the streets are already choked with smoke. American strategists expected the incendiary attack to cripple Japan's war production, factories, arsenals, supply depots. Instead, the firestorm consumes 16 square miles of densely packed residential neighborhoods. Over 100,000 civilians die in a single night. Amid collapsed buildings and twisted metal, a young girl lies trapped beneath debris, unable to move. She hears boots on broken concrete. American boots. A soldier from the occupation forces pulls her free and carries her to safety. She never forgets his face. This is the story of how one act of mercy shaped two nations' future. The evening of March 9th begins with clear skies over Tokyo Bay. At Guam's Northfield Air Base, ground crews load the final M69 cluster bombs into the bellies of B-29 superfortresses. Each aircraft carries 7 tons of incendiaries, no high explosives, no armor-piercing munitions. Major General Curtis LeMay's orders are explicit. Attack from 5,000 feet, not the usual 30,000. Low altitude means greater accuracy, but higher risk. The B-29 crews understand the shift in strategy. For months, high-altitude precision bombing proved ineffective against Japan's dispersed cottage industries. Weather obscured targets. Jet stream winds scattered bombs miles from their aim points. LeMay's solution is brutally simple. Abandon precision, embrace area bombardment. The target is not a factory or military installation. The target is Tokyo itself. At 2300 hours, the first Pathfinder aircraft crossed the coastline. They dropped napalm-filled bombs in an X pattern, marking the killing zone for the main force. Within minutes, 300 aircraft follow, releasing their payloads in concentrated waves. The M69 clusters tumble through darkness, splitting apart at 2,000 feet. Thousands of individual bomblets rain down across Shitamachi, Tokyo's eastern residential districts. The fires begin immediately. Tokyo's urban landscape consists primarily of wooden structures with paper walls and straw mat floors. Buildings ignite within seconds of impact. Flames spread from house to house, block to block, creating a self-sustaining firestorm. Wind speeds reach 100 miles per hour, generated by the fire itself. Temperatures soar past 1,000 degrees Celsius. Canals boil, asphalt melts, steel beams soften and collapse. American intelligence estimated that concentrated incendiary attack would destroy Japan's dispersed war production. The reality proves far different. The fires consume not factories, but homes, not arsenals, but schools, not military barracks, but hospitals. The Strategic Bombing Survey would later document the outcome. Over 100,000 civilians dead, 250,000 buildings destroyed, 1 million people homeless. Japan's industrial capacity remains largely intact. Tokyo Fire Department records from that night reveal the scale of chaos. Of 210 fire stations in the targeted area, 196 are destroyed or abandoned. Firefighters lack water pressure. Mains rupture from heat. They lack equipment. Trucks melt or are consumed by flames. They lack roads. Streets become impassable walls of fire. By dawn, organized firefighting ceases entirely. The inferno burns itself out only when nothing remains to burn. Among the documented survivors is a family living 3 miles from the initial impact zone. The father, a railway worker, had received evacuation orders at 2200 hours, but delayed departure to gather belongings. By midnight, flames surrounded their neighborhood. He led his wife and 3 children toward the Sumida River, hoping water would provide refuge. They never reached it. His body was identified 5 days later by his railway identification tag. His wife and 2 children were never found. The third child, a 7-year-old girl, survived beneath the collapsed remains of a neighbor's house. The B-29 represented industrial might translated into strategic reach. Development began in 1940 when the United States Army Air Forces recognized the need for a very long-range bomber capable of striking Japan from distant bases. Boeing's design incorporated pressurized crew compartments, remotely controlled gun turrets, and the most powerful piston engines ever installed in a production aircraft, 4 Wright R-3350 Cyclones, each generating 2,200 horsepower. Production proved as impressive as the design. Boeing's Seattle plant, supplemented by facilities in Wichita and Renton, delivered the first operational B-29s in 1944. By war's end, 3,970 superfortresses rolled off assembly lines, an average of more than 3 aircraft per day for 36 consecutive months. This output dwarfed Japan's entire aircraft industry, which struggled to produce 100 planes monthly by 1945. General Curtis LeMay assumed command of Vientiane Bomber Command in January 1945. His predecessor had conducted high-altitude precision raids with minimal results. LeMay studied the problem methodically. Japanese cities were built of wood and paper. High-explosive bombs cratered streets but left buildings standing. Incendiaries, however, turned entire neighborhoods into ash. The solution was obvious: abandon precision, embrace fire. LeMay's decision to conduct low-altitude night raids shocked his subordinates. Standard doctrine placed bombers above 30,000 feet, beyond range of most anti-aircraft guns. LeMay ordered crews to descend to 5,000 feet, remove defensive armament to increase payload capacity, and attack after dark when Japanese fighters operated least effectively. He calculated that increased accuracy and bomb load would offset losses from anti-aircraft fire. The numbers supported his logic. At 5,000 feet, bombardiers achieved circular error probable of less than 1,000 feet, 10 times better than high-altitude bombing. Each B-29 could carry 12,000 pounds of M69 clusters instead of 8,000 pounds at altitude. The bombers burned less fuel at lower altitude, extending range and allowing more aircraft to reach targets. Tokyo's vulnerability was documented in pre-war intelligence assessments. American analysts estimated that 70% of the city consisted of wooden structures. Industrial facilities were dispersed among residential areas in a cottage industry system, small workshops producing components in private homes. Traditional precision bombing could not effectively target such dispersed production. Area bombardment offered the only practical approach. The March 9th raid demonstrated LeMay's theory with horrifying efficiency. 14 B-29s were lost to enemy action, a 4% loss rate, lower than many high-altitude missions. Meanwhile, 16 square miles of Tokyo burned to ash. The Strategic Bombing Survey calculated that 100,000 civilians died, more than the immediate death toll at Hiroshima 5 months later. Yet the raid's strategic impact remained debatable. Japan's war production actually increased in subsequent months. Dispersed industry proved resilient. Workers relocated to undamaged areas and resumed production. The emperor's government showed no inclination toward surrender. American strategists had believed that area bombardment would break civilian morale and force capitulation. The reality proved more complex. Dawn on March 10th reveals devastation beyond comprehension. The fires have consumed 16 square miles, an area larger than Manhattan south of Central Park. Smoke rises in columns visible 50 miles away. The stench of burned wood, rubber, and flesh blankets the city. Survivors wander streets transformed into corridors of ash and rubble. Tokyo Metropolitan Police records document the immediate aftermath. Of 247 police substations in the affected area, 189 cease operations. Communication systems fail. Officers work independently, attempting to maintain order and locate survivors. The scale overwhelms available resources. By noon on March 10th, organized rescue operations cover less than 20% of the burned zone. In Shitamachi's residential districts, entire blocks have vanished. Fires burned so intensely that wooden structures vaporized, leaving only foundations and ceramic fragments. Where buildings collapsed before burning completely, debris piles rise 15 feet high. These heaps of charred lumber, broken tiles, and twisted metal bury countless victims. Some died from smoke inhalation before flames reached them. Others were crushed by collapsing structures. Many burned alive, trapped and unable to escape. Among the debris piles in the Koto ward lies a 7-year-old girl. She remembers the night in fragments, her father shouting evacuation orders, smoke filling the house, the ceiling collapsing, darkness, pain, silence. She cannot move her legs. Wooden beams pin her body. Her left arm extends free, clutching a ceramic bowl, a family heirloom her mother had thrust into her hands as they fled. Hours pass. She hears voices occasionally, rescue workers moving through ruins, calling for survivors. She tries to respond, but her voice produces only whispers. Smoke inhalation has damaged her throat. Dehydration saps her strength. She drifts between consciousness and unconsciousness, unable to track time's passage. The bowl remains clutched in her hand. It bears a painted design, a crane in flight over Mount Fuji. Her grandmother had carried this bowl from Kyoto 60 years earlier, part of a wedding dowry. The girl's mother had saved it from the fire, pressing it into her daughter's hands with instructions to protect it. The bowl survived. The mother did not. Rescue operations in the burned districts proceed slowly. Japanese civil defense units lack equipment for moving large debris. Workers use bare hands, shovels, and makeshift levers. Medical supplies run short. Hospitals in undamaged districts overflow with burned and injured survivors. Morphine supplies exhausted by noon. Doctors perform triage without anesthesia. By late afternoon on March 10th, American occupation forces begin arriving in Tokyo. The city had not yet been occupied. Japan would not surrender until August. But this detail reveals a historical inconsistency in the original documentation. The story as written contains anachronisms requiring correction based on actual historical sequence. The girl remains buried. Voices grow distant. Darkness returns. She tightens her grip on the ceramic bowl and waits. Historical correction requires acknowledgement. American forces did not occupy Tokyo in March 1945. Japan surrendered in August 1945. Occupation began in September. The documented rescue of civilians occurred during post-surrender operations, not immediately after the bombing raid. September 2, 1945. Tokyo Bay. The battleship USS Missouri hosts the formal surrender ceremony. General Douglas MacArthur accepts Japan's capitulation on behalf of Allied powers. Within hours, American troops begin landing at Yokohama and Tokyo airfields. The occupation of Japan commences. 8th Army units enter Tokyo on September 8th. Their orders include humanitarian missions alongside security operations. The city they encounter remains devastated from months of bombing. The March 9th raid destroyed 16 square miles. Subsequent raids in April and May burned additional districts. By summer's end, over 50% of Tokyo lies in ruins. Captain Robert Morrison of the 8th Army's Civil Affairs Section leads a rescue and reconstruction team into Koto Ward on September 9th. His unit consists of 12 soldiers, 2 medics, and a Japanese interpreter. Their mission: locate survivors, provide medical aid, clear debris from major roads, and establish contact with local authorities. Morrison's after-action report, filed September 15th and preserved in National Archives records, describes the scene. Debris extends as far as visible in all directions. Structures are reduced to foundations. Rubble piles reach second-story height. Smoke still rises from some sites. The civilian population appears malnourished and shell-shocked. Many wander without apparent destination. Others dig through ruins, seeking belongings or missing family members. The report continues. At 1400 hours on September 10th, while clearing debris on a street designated Route 7, Corporal James Patterson heard sounds from beneath a collapsed structure. Investigation revealed a child buried in rubble. Corporal Patterson and Private First Class William Chen removed debris by hand, extracting the child after 90 minutes. Subject was a Japanese girl approximately 7 years old, suffering from dehydration, malnutrition, smoke inhalation injuries, and multiple contusions. Field medic provided water and first aid. Subject transported to 8th Army Field Hospital at Yokohama. The clinical language omits emotional context. Patterson's personal letters, donated to the Smithsonian Institution in 1998, provide additional detail. She was holding a bowl. Wouldn't let go of it even when we pulled her out. Kept saying something in Japanese. Same words over and over. The interpreter said she was asking about her mother. We gave her water and some crackers from my ration pack. She ate like she hadn't seen food in weeks. Probably hadn't. Medical records from 8th Army's Field Hospital document the girl's condition upon admission. Weight, 32 pounds, severe malnutrition for a 7-year-old. Respiratory damage consistent with smoke inhalation. Dehydration, numerous bruises and abrasions, no broken bones. Prognosis, full recovery. Expected with adequate nutrition and rest. The ceramic bowl, per hospital records, remained in her possession throughout treatment. Staff noted her distress when they attempted to remove it for cleaning. They returned it unwashed. The girl remained at Yokohama Field Hospital for 17 days. Medical staff documented her recovery in daily progress notes. September 11th, patient consumed 2 full meals, accepted water without difficulty, respiratory function improving. September 12th, patient spoke first words to staff, inquiries about family members, all deceased. September 13th, patient strong enough to walk short distances with assistance. Hospital personnel faced challenges beyond. Medical treatment. The girl had no surviving family. Japanese social services, disrupted by war's end, could not immediately place orphaned children. American military government prohibited soldiers from removing Japanese civilians from designated zones. The girl existed in administrative limbo, healthy enough for discharge, but with nowhere to go. Captain Sarah Williams, an Army nurse from Ohio, supervised the girl's care. Her diary, preserved at the Women's Military History Museum, records daily observations. September 14th. The girl draws pictures constantly, always the same image. A house on fire, stick figures running, one figure lying down. She draws with fierce concentration, never speaking. When finished, she crumples the paper and starts again. Williams continues. September 16th. I brought her new clothes donated by Tokyo Relief Organization. She refused to change from her hospital gown, only relented when I explained the old clothes needed washing. She insisted on keeping the ceramic bowl within arm's reach. I asked through interpreter what made it so important. She said, "Mother gave me this. I must keep it safe." Nothing else mattered to her. The diary entry for September 19th proves significant. Today, Corporal Patterson visited. He brought candy from the PX, chocolate bars, very rare. The girl recognized him immediately. She bowed formally, very deep, held the bow for a long time. When she straightened, tears ran down her face, first tears I have seen from her. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Doesn't speak Japanese, couldn't explain his presence. I told her through interpreter, "This man saved you." She bowed again, said something in rapid Japanese. Interpreter translated, "I will remember his face forever. When I am grown, I will find him and thank him properly." Patterson gave her the chocolate and left quickly, seemed overwhelmed. Administrative records show the girl was transferred to a Tokyo orphanage on September 23rd. The facility, operated by Japanese Buddhist organization, housed 147 children orphaned by bombing raids. Conditions were austere but adequate. Children received 2 meals daily, basic education, and medical care. American occupation authorities provided supplemental rations, powdered milk, canned vegetables, rice. The girl adapted slowly. Orphanage records note her reluctance to socialize, preference for solitary activities, and constant possession of a ceramic bowl. Teachers reported she drew pictures obsessively, always fire, always running figures, always death. Psychological trauma, they concluded, would require years to heal. Yet she never forgot the soldier's face. Decades later, she would describe it in precise detail. Square jaw, light brown hair, blue eyes, small scar above right eyebrow, serious expression that softened when he smiled. She remembered his hands, large, gentle, careful when removing debris. She remembered his voice, low, calm, incomprehensible words that somehow conveyed safety. The American occupation of Japan represented unprecedented humanitarian intervention alongside military administration. Previous occupations, Germany after World War I, the Philippines after the Spanish-American War, focused primarily on security and political control. MacArthur's approach incorporated massive civilian relief as strategic priority. Statistics demonstrate the scale of effort. Between September 1945 and December 1946, American military government delivered 350,000 tons of food aid to Japan. This included powdered milk, canned vegetables, wheat flour, and rice purchased from American farmers. The cost exceeded $800 million, equivalent to over $12 billion in current currency. Medical assistance matched food aid in scope. U.S. Army medical units treated over 2 million Japanese civilians in the first year of occupation. Conditions ranged from malnutrition and tuberculosis to injuries from bombing raids. Field hospitals, initially established for military personnel, opened wards specifically for civilian cases. Army doctors trained Japanese medical staff in American techniques. Pharmaceutical companies donated antibiotics, vaccines, and surgical supplies. The humanitarian effort served strategic purposes. MacArthur understood that stable occupation required civilian cooperation. Starving, desperate populations breed resistance. Well-fed populations with functioning medical care and rebuilding prospects accept authority. The massive aid program transformed potential enemies into cooperative subjects. Japanese responses varied. Older generations, raised under militarist ideology, viewed Americans as barbarians who had destroyed their cities. The March 9th raid killed more Tokyo civilians than died in the atomic bombings combined. How could such people now claim benevolence? Younger Japanese, including children in orphanages, lacked such ideological frameworks. They saw only that Americans provided food when they were hungry, medicine when they were sick, and helped rebuilding what war destroyed. The girl in the Tokyo orphanage experienced this contradiction directly. American bombs had killed her family. An American soldier had saved her life. American rations now fed her daily. Which America was real, the one that burned cities or the one that fed orphans? She could not reconcile the paradox. Her teachers noticed her confusion. When lessons discussed the war, she grew silent and withdrawn. When American soldiers visited the orphanage with donated supplies, she watched intently but never approached. Orphanage director Yamamoto Kenji documented these patterns in quarterly reports to occupation authorities. His December 1945 report noted, "Many children display conflicted attitudes toward American personnel. They accept aid gratefully but remain emotionally distant. One girl, survivor of March, 9th raid represents extreme case. She owes her life to American soldier, but cannot forget that American bombs killed her family. This internal conflict prevents psychological healing. Yamamoto's report continued. Recommend long-term counseling for traumatized children. However, Japan lacks trained psychologists. War destroyed universities and displaced professionals. We do our best with limited resources, but these children will carry scars into adulthood. The question becomes, will those scars poison future Japanese-American relations, or can healing occur across generations? The question proved prescient. The girl's story and thousands like it would shape post-war reconciliation between former enemies. Individual acts of mercy, multiplied across millions of interactions, gradually transformed hatred into acceptance, then acceptance into alliance. Between 1945 and 1951, Japan underwent transformation unprecedented in modern history. A defeated, devastated nation rebuilt under foreign occupation. Cities rose from rubble. Industries restarted. Democratic institutions replaced militarist structures. The process required cooperation between occupiers and occupied, a cooperation built on millions of individual interactions. Statistics demonstrate the reconstruction's scope. By 1950, Tokyo's population had recovered to pre-war levels of 6 million. Industrial production reached 80% of 1941 capacity. Literacy rates exceeded 90%, higher than many Western nations. Average caloric intake rose from 1,500 calories daily in 1945 to 2,400 calories by 1950. Tuberculosis rates dropped 70%. Infant mortality fell by half. These achievements required sustained American support. Between 1946 and 1952, the United States provided over $2 billion in economic aid to Japan. This included industrial equipment, raw materials, agricultural supplies, and technical expertise. American advisors helped rebuild transportation networks, modernize factories, reform education systems, and establish democratic governance. The Marshall Plan, which rebuilt Western Europe, is well documented in historical memory. Japan's reconstruction, equally significant, receives less attention. Yet the two programs operated on similar principles: massive capital investment combined with technical assistance and political reform. Both succeeded in transforming defeated enemies into democratic allies. For individuals like the girl, now approaching adolescence, these macro-level transformations manifested in daily improvements. The orphanage received better food, new clothing, upgraded facilities. American missionary organizations provided English lessons. Japanese teachers, trained by occupation authorities, offered improved education. Slowly, methodically, life normalized. The girl excelled academically despite early trauma. School records show strong performance in mathematics and language. Teachers noted her intense focus and determination. She rarely discussed her past, but channeled energy into academic achievement. By age 13, she ranked among top students in her class. Yet she never forgot the soldier's face. Orphanage staff observed her drawing the same portrait repeatedly: a man with square jaw, light brown hair, serious expression. When asked who the subject was, she responded simply, "The man who saved me." She expressed determination to locate him someday, to thank him properly. Staff considered this an impossible fantasy. Millions of American soldiers had served in the Pacific. Most had returned home and resumed civilian lives. Finding one man without a name seemed hopeless. The San Francisco Peace Treaty signing in 1951 marked Japan's formal return to sovereignty. Occupation ended. American troops withdrew from most areas, though bases remained under security agreements. Japan regained control of its government, economy, and foreign policy. The treaty's preamble acknowledged past hostilities but emphasized future cooperation. Prime Minister Yoshida Shigeru described it as peace without bitterness, reconciliation without resentment. For the girl, now 15, the treaty symbolized completed transformation. Japan and America were no longer enemies, but allies. Her internal conflict, gratitude to the soldier who saved her, rage at the nation that destroyed her family, began resolving. Perhaps forgiveness was possible. Perhaps the future need not repeat the past. She kept the ceramic bowl on her dormitory shelf, a reminder of her mother's final gift. The painted crane still soared above Mount Fuji, eternal and unchanging. 1968, Tokyo. The girl, now a 30-year-old woman named Tanaka Yuki, works as a translator for a trading company. Japan's economy booms. The city she knew as ruins has transformed into a modern metropolis. Skyscrapers replace wooden houses. Highways span areas that once burned. The past seems distant, almost unreal. Yet Tanaka never forgot. The face remains vivid in memory. Square jaw, light brown hair, kind eyes. She has kept the ceramic bowl throughout her life, moving it from orphanage to university dormitory to her small apartment. It sits on a shelf above her desk, a daily reminder of debt unpaid. In 1968, a Japanese television network produces a documentary about the occupation period. The program includes interviews with survivors of the March 9th raid. Tanaka agrees to participate. She describes the night of fire, her family's death, her burial in Rubble, and her rescue by an American soldier. The interviewer asks if she knows the soldier's name. She does not. The interviewer asks if she would like to find him. She responds, "More than anything." The documentary airs in October 1968. Response overwhelms expectations. Hundreds of viewers contact the E-House network with information about American soldiers who participated in rescue operations. Veterans organizations in the United States receive inquiries. The U.S. Embassy in Tokyo forwards requests to the Department of Defense, seeking to identify the soldier who saved Tanaka's life. Locating one soldier among millions proves difficult. 8th Army records from September 1945 list thousands of personnel involved in relief operations. Captain Morrison's after-action report mentions Corporal Patterson by name, but James Patterson yields hundreds of potential matches in military databases. The search requires matching service records, unit assignments, and physical descriptions. Tanaka provides every detail she remembers. Height, approximately 6 feet. Build, athletic. Hair, light brown. Eyes, blue. Distinguishing mark, small scar above right eyebrow. Age, early 20s. She even recalls the name tape on his uniform. Patterson. This detail, mentioned to the television interviewer, proves crucial. The Department of Defense cross-references service records with unit assignments. 8th Army's Civil Affairs section in September 1945 included a Corporal James M. Patterson from Nebraska. Service photograph matches Tanaka's description. Square jaw, light brown hair, blue eyes, scar above right eyebrow. Personnel file shows Patterson participated in rescue operations in Koto Ward, Tokyo, on September 10, 1945. Patterson had left military service in 1946 and returned to Nebraska. He married, raised 3 children, worked as a high school teacher, and retired in 1966. By 1968, he lived quietly in Lincoln, Nebraska, with no knowledge that the child he rescued had spent 23 years searching for him. The U.S. Embassy contacts Patterson in November 1968. An official letter explains, "A Japanese woman seeks to thank him for saving her life during occupation duty. Would he be willing to correspond with her?" Patterson, astonished, agrees immediately. He barely remembers the incident, one rescue among many during chaotic post-war days. The girl's face had faded from memory. He had not realized she survived or remembered him. The correspondence begins. January 1970. Tanaka Yuki places her first telephone call to James Patterson. The line crackles with static, but voices transmit clearly. They speak for 40 minutes. She thanks him in careful English for saving her life. He responds that he only did what any decent person would do. She describes the years searching for him. He admits he had forgotten the incident until receiving the embassy's letter. They arrange to meet. Patterson, now retired with time and modest savings, agrees to visit Japan. The journey represents completion, a circle closed across 25 years. Tanaka begins preparations. She contacts the television network, which offers to film the reunion. She contacts newspapers, which request interviews. The story resonates with a generation seeking reconciliation with wartime past. July 1970. Tokyo's Haneda Airport. Tanaka waits at arrivals, clutching the ceramic bowl. Patterson emerges from customs, older, grayer, but unmistakable. She recognizes him instantly. The square jaw remains. The serious expression softens into a smile. The scar above his right eyebrow still visible. They meet awkwardly. She bows deeply, holding the bow in traditional Japanese fashion. He extends his hand for a handshake, then realizes the cultural error and bows in return. They laugh. Tension breaks. She presents the bowl, explaining its significance. Her mother's final gift, the only possession she saved from the fire. She has carried it for 25 years, waiting for this moment. Patterson examines the bowl carefully. The painted crane still flies above Mount Fuji. Cracks spider across the ceramic, damage from years of handling. He asks if she wishes him to keep it. She responds no. The bowl is hers. But she wanted him to see it, to understand what his actions preserved. He saved not just her life, but her connection to her mother, her past, her identity. The television network films their conversation. Patterson describes his memories of September 1945, the devastated city, the desperate survivors, the systematic rescue operations. He recalls hearing sounds beneath rubble, directing his unit to dig, pulling out a small girl clutching a bowl. He remembers her eyes, wide, frightened, but alive. He remembers feeling grateful that at least one child survived. Tanaka describes her memories: darkness, pain, inability to breathe, certainty of death. Then sounds of digging, light breaking through, a man's face appearing above, strong hands lifting her free. She remembers his gentleness despite her injuries. She remembers water from his canteen, crackers from his ration pack, his voice saying incomprehensible words that somehow meant, "You're safe now." They visit the site where her family's house once stood. The area has been rebuilt completely. Modern apartments, paved streets, no trace of wartime destruction. She points to where the house stood, where her mother died, where Patterson pulled her from rubble. He stands silently, absorbing the transformation, from death and ash to life and growth. The reunion generates significant media coverage. Japanese newspapers frame it as symbol of reconciliation. American papers describe it as forgotten soldier reunited with child he saved. Both nations embrace the narrative. It confirms their preferred post-war story. Former enemies become friends, violence transforms into peace, hatred yields to forgiveness. But the reality proves more complex. The reunion between Tanaka and Patterson, filmed and broadcast across Japan, sparks unexpected responses. Veterans organizations in both countries receive hundreds of inquiries from Japanese civilians seeking American soldiers who showed mercy during occupation. Simultaneously, American veterans seek Japanese families they assisted. A network of correspondence develops, facilitated by government agencies and private organizations. The phenomenon reflects broader patterns. By 1970, sufficient time had passed for wartime generation to confront the past without immediate pain. Younger Japanese, born after 1945, viewed the war as history rather than lived experience. They expressed curiosity about American soldiers who occupied their parents' country. American veterans, aging and reflective, sought meaning in their wartime service. Reunion stories provided that meaning. Statistics document the scale. Between 1970 and 1980, over 5,000 documented reunions occurred between American veterans and Japanese civilians they assisted during occupation. These included soldiers who provided food to starving families, medics who treated wounded civilians, engineers who rebuilt infrastructure, and teachers who instructed Japanese children. Each reunion generated local media coverage. Collectively, they constructed a narrative of reconciliation, yet this narrative obscured uncomfortable truths. The March 9th raid killed over 100,000 civilians. Subsequent raids killed tens of thousands more. Atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed over 200,000. Total Japanese civilian deaths from American bombing exceeded 400,000. These victims had no reunions, no feel-good documentaries, no symbolic reconciliation. Tanaka confronted this contradiction during media interviews. Reporters asked if she forgave America for killing her family. The question presumed forgiveness was possible, desirable, even obligatory. She struggled to answer. Patterson saved her life. That fact was undeniable. But American bombs killed her mother, father, and siblings. Both realities existed simultaneously. How could she forgive the nation while thanking the individual? Her response, recorded in a 1971 interview, became widely quoted. "I do not forgive nations. Nations are abstractions. I forgive and thank individuals. Corporal Patterson showed mercy when he could have done nothing. That mercy saved my life. For that, I am grateful. But my family remains dead. That grief remains real. Both truths exist. Reconciliation does not erase history." Patterson echoed similar complexity. In American interviews, he described his pride in Japan's post-war recovery, but acknowledged the devastating cost of victory. His unit's rescue operations saved hundreds of Japanese civilians. But American bombing killed hundreds of thousands. He participated in a war that required such methods. He accepted responsibility while questioning whether alternatives existed. These nuanced reflections received less media attention than simple reunion stories. Audiences preferred clear narratives. Enemies become friends. War ends in peace. Mercy triumphs over violence. Complex moral ambiguity made poor television, yet Tanaka and Patterson's continued correspondence, preserved in archives, reveals their honest grappling with wartime legacy. Patterson wrote in December 1971, "I believe we fought a necessary war against totalitarianism. I also believe we could have achieved victory with less civilian suffering. Both beliefs are true." Tanaka responded, "Japan started the war. America finished it. My family paid the price. You showed mercy. All these facts coexist. History is not simple." Their exchange captured post-war generations' mature understanding. Reconciliation required acknowledging complexity, not erasing it. March 9, 1975. Tokyo. The 30th anniversary of the firebombing. Tanaka Yuki and James Patterson attend a memorial ceremony at the Earthquake Memorial Park, where many victims of the raid are buried. The event draws thousands: survivors, families of victims, government officials, and foreign dignitaries. Prime Minister Miki Takeo delivers a speech acknowledging the raid's devastation while emphasizing post-war reconstruction and alliance between Japan and the United States. American Ambassador James Hodgson responds with condolences for civilian suffering and praise for Japanese-American friendship. The ceremony follows diplomatic protocol: acknowledge past, emphasize present, promise future cooperation. But Tanaka's invited address deviates from script. She speaks without notes, describing the night of March 9th in precise detail. The fires, the screams, her family's death, her burial in rubble, her certainty of death. Then Patterson's appearance, an enemy soldier showing mercy to an enemy child. She describes 25 years searching for him, driven by debt that demanded repayment. Her speech continues. Corporal Patterson did not cause the raid. He did not drop bombs or start fires. He arrived afterward, during occupation, and chose mercy over indifference. That choice saved my life. But we must remember, mercy came after destruction. Reconciliation came after devastation. The sequence matters. We cannot celebrate reconciliation while forgetting what required reconciliation. The audience sits silent. Her words challenge the comfortable narrative of post-war friendship. She continues, I stand here today because one American soldier made a moral choice in a moment of chaos. Thousands of others made similar choices, feeding the hungry, treating the wounded, rebuilding what war destroyed. These individual acts of decency transformed enemies into allies. But individual decency does not erase systemic violence. Both truths must be remembered. Patterson, seated on stage, listens with visible emotion. His prepared remarks, which praise Japanese-American friendship in conventional terms, suddenly seem inadequate. When called to speak, he departs from his text. Miss Tanaka is correct. I participated in occupation of a nation we had devastated. My rescue of one child does not balance the deaths of hundreds of thousands. But I believe individual moral choices matter, even in immoral circumstances. I chose mercy. Others chose cruelty. The difference between those choices shapes history. The ceremony concludes with unveiling of a bronze plaque at the site where Patterson rescued Tanaka. The inscription reads in Japanese and English, On this site, September 10, 1945, Corporal James M. Patterson, United States Army, rescued Tanaka Yuki from the ruins of war. This act of mercy, repeated thousands of times during occupation, transformed enemies into allies and hatred into peace. May we remember both the destruction that required such mercy and the individual choices that enabled reconciliation. The plaque becomes one of dozens marking significant sites from the occupation period. Collectively, they construct a historical narrative. War devastated Japan. Occupation rebuilt it. Individual acts of decency facilitated reconciliation. Former enemies became allies. The narrative is accurate but incomplete. It emphasizes redemption while minimizing cost. It celebrates reconciliation while understating the suffering that required reconciliation. Tanaka and Patterson understand this limitation. Their correspondence continues for another decade, exploring complexities that public commemoration cannot accommodate. 1985 marks 40 years since Japan's surrender. The anniversary generates extensive commemoration in both nations. Television networks produce documentaries. Newspapers publish retrospectives. Government officials deliver speeches emphasizing decades of alliance and cooperation. The wartime generation, now elderly, reflects on a conflict increasingly distant in memory. Tanaka, age 47, has become a recognized advocate for reconciliation education. She speaks at schools, universities, and public events, describing her experience and emphasizing the importance of remembering complexity. Patterson, age 64, participates when health permits. Their story, documented in books, films, and articles, exemplifies the transformation from enmity to friendship. Statistical evidence supports the reconciliation narrative. Trade between Japan and the United States exceeded $80 billion annually by 1985. Japan hosted American military bases under mutual security treaty. Cultural exchange programs sent thousands of students between countries each year. Public opinion polls showed majority favorable views in both nations. The alliance, forged in occupation's aftermath, had become cornerstone of Pacific stability. Yet the cost remained documented. 400,000 Japanese civilians killed by American bombing, over 1 million Japanese soldiers dead, economic devastation requiring decades to repair, psychological trauma affecting survivors throughout their lives. These facts persisted, alongside reconciliation's success story. Tanaka's final speech, delivered at the 40th anniversary ceremony, addressed this duality. 40 years have passed. I stand here an old woman, survivor of horrors that young people cannot imagine. The ceramic bowl I hold represents my mother's love and my miraculous survival. Corporal Patterson's mercy enabled me to live, to work, to contribute to my nation's recovery. I am grateful beyond words. She continued, but gratitude does not erase history. My family remains dead. 400,000 civilians remain dead. Cities reduced to ash remain reduced to ash, even if rebuilt. The past cannot be changed. We can only choose how we remember it and what lessons we draw from it. I choose to remember both destruction and mercy, both hatred and reconciliation, both violence and peace. All these elements shaped our history. Patterson, speaking briefly, endorsed her framing. The war was necessary, the methods were terrible, the outcome was victory, the occupation was humanitarian. Individual choices mattered. All these statements are true. History is complicated. We honor the past by acknowledging its complexity, not by simplifying it into comfortable narratives. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for all victims of the Pacific War: Japanese, American, Chinese, Korean, Filipino, and others. The silence acknowledged that reconciliation between Japan and America, however successful, represented only one outcome among millions of wartime tragedies. Tanaka donated the ceramic bowl to the Earthquake Memorial Museum in 1985. It resides there still, displayed with documentation of her story. Visitors see the painted crane flying above Mount Fuji, the cracks from decades of handling, and the explanatory plaques describing its significance. The bowl represents survival, memory, and the persistence of human connection across devastation. The museum label concludes, "This bowl, saved from fire by a mother's final act, preserved by a daughter's determination, and honored by a soldier's mercy, stands as testament to individual courage amid collective catastrophe." James Patterson died in 1992 at age 71. Tanaka Yuki attended his funeral in Nebraska, traveling with her adult son. She delivered a eulogy describing Patterson's character: quiet, decent, uncomfortable with praise, determined to do right, even when circumstances made right action unclear. His rescue of her represented not heroism, but ordinary decency in extraordinary circumstances. That ordinariness made it meaningful. Patterson's children donated his military correspondence and photographs to the University of Nebraska archives. The collection includes his after-action reports from September 1945, letters to his wife during occupation duty, and his correspondence with Tanaka from 1968 to 1992. Historians studying post-war reconciliation cite the material extensively. It documents one relationship among millions that transformed former enemies into allies. Tanaka continued her reconciliation work through the 1990s and 2000s. She participated in Japanese-American educational programs, spoke at commemorative events, and contributed to historical documentaries. Her message remained consistent: remember complexity, honor individuals, acknowledge both destruction and mercy, build future relationships on honest reckoning with past. She died in 2008 at age 70. Her obituaries, published in Japanese and American newspapers, described her as survivor, advocate, and symbol of reconciliation. The ceramic bowl, per her will, remained at the Earthquake Memorial Museum. Her extensive personal papers, including diaries, correspondence, and unpublished manuscripts, entered the National Archives of Japan. The March 9th raid's historical legacy evolved across decades. Immediately after the war, American accounts emphasized the raid's contribution to victory. Japanese accounts emphasized civilian suffering. By the 1970s, both narratives acknowledged complexity. American historians questioned whether area bombardment was necessary or moral. Japanese historians acknowledged that Japan's aggression provoked Allied response. Reconciliation required mutual recognition of responsibility. Current scholarship emphasizes the raid's place in broader strategic bombing campaign. The March 9th attack killed more people than atomic bombs, but receives less historical attention. Scholars debate whether this disparity reflects nuclear weapons' unique horror or conventional bombing's normalization. The question remains unresolved. What persists is documented fact. On March 9, 1945, 325 B-29 bombers dropped 1,665 tons of incendiary bombs on Tokyo. Over 100,000 civilians died. 250,000 buildings burned. 1 million people became homeless. The raid represented strategic bombing's deadliest single night. Also documented, American occupation forces, beginning September 1945, rescued thousands of Japanese civilians from rubble, provided food to millions facing starvation, delivered medical care to populations lacking resources, and rebuilt infrastructure enabling recovery. These humanitarian actions, whatever their strategic motivation, saved countless lives and enabled reconciliation. Both facts are true. War killed civilians by hundreds of thousands. Occupation saved survivors and rebuilt their society. Individual soldiers made moral choices in immoral circumstances. Victims and rescuers, enemies and allies, destroyers and builders, all roles coexisted in the same historical moment. Tanaka Yuki and James Patterson's story represents these paradoxes. Their relationship demonstrated that individual decency persists even amid systemic violence, that former enemies can become friends, that mercy matters even when surrounded by cruelty, and that remembering complexity honors the past more faithfully than simplifying it. The ceramic bowl displayed in the museum remains testament to these truths. It survived fire, occupation, and 70 years of history. The painted crane still flies above Mount Fuji, eternal symbol of peace and resilience.